Hey guys, welcome back to Who, What, Where, a true crime podcast. We're your hosts, Caitlin,
Hannah,
and Abigail.
If you've never listened before, just know this is a very chatty girls' night sleepover type podcast. We will speculate and theorize a lot, so if that's not your jam, we totally understand. But if it is, you can tune in every Monday for a full-length episode, and then come back every Friday for a Freaky Fast Friday episode, where we give you the rundown on a case, sometimes unsolved, always freaky, in 30 minutes or less. This week we're going to be talking about like a disappearance case. The victims did die, but I think there's a lot of mystery surrounding like
the disappearance.
Like did they accidentally die or was there like foul play involved?
Okay.
This is like actually, fun fact, a episode that was originally going to be a Freaky Fast, and I ended up just like finding like maybe that's like on me for like literally just deep diving too much or like going down kind of a rabbit hole.
Very Caitlin.
Yeah, like I think
that happened to me with an episode too. I like just started researching and I was like, this is gonna have to be a full length episode because there's so much here to like unpack. And
that's exactly
you have to account a little bit for like our reactions too, because if you guys are new to the podcast, you wouldn't know this, but basically every episode we have one person do all of like the main research. And so then it's kind of like a surprise to the other two of us who haven't done the research, like what exactly is going on in the case. So,
well, especially with lesser known cases, which I don't think this one is particularly
I've never heard of it.
Me either.
Yeah, I don't think it's super well known. So basically it is about these two Dutch girls. They go to Panama, in South America, and they basically are like volunteering and kind of just vacationing, and they go for a hike one day and they go missing.
Okay.
And it was deemed accidental.
But like an accidental death.
Yes, but there's a lot more to the story is the thing. Like,
I'm excited. I get excited about the cases.
Okay, so
yeah, if you don't get excited about true crime, this probably isn't the place.
I mean, I'm obviously not excited
why
about
are you
the deaths.
here?
But
why are you here if you don't get excited about true crime?
Yeah, maybe this isn't the one for you guys.
Okay, so Kris Kremers, one of the victims, she was born August 9th, 1992 in the Netherlands. This would make her around 22 or 21 when she disappeared. And then Lisanne, I believe it's Lisanne Froon, was born September 24th, 1991, also in the Netherlands, and she was 22 when she disappeared. Both girls were blonde and beautiful and like tall, very like Dutch and like Northern European looking. Lisanne was 6 foot tall and loved playing volleyball, and she had very recently graduated from college with a degree in applied sciences. This was just like the last September. It was kind of a graduation trip for the both of them.
Okay.
Kris was described as creative and open, and she graduated with a specialization in art education from the University of Utrecht. In the months leading up to their disappearance in Panama, the girls worked together at a cafe in their hometown of Amersfoort and had recently moved into a dorm room together. They had been saving for a long time to make this trip, which is a mixture between like an educational trip, because they were wanting to like immerse themselves and learn Spanish, but they also like really were interested in like volunteering with children in the local community, and I don't know, they're basically like humanitarians.
What a lot of affluent people do, like either before or after they go to college.
Totally.
They like take time to like explore their lives and like what they want to do and help and give back to people. So
they seem
that's totally on trend for me. I understand.
They seem like really great women, and so I mean that makes this just extra sad, you know.
Tell me about it.
I'm excited to get into the details, but I just wanted to say that like that's pretty cool that they were doing that just out of like for themselves, but
hearts,
also the goodness of themselves. And I mean, that's such a Dutch thing, in my personal opinion. Like, I feel like that's very Dutch. You know, like, Canadians are, like, known for being really nice.
All right, so Lisanne and Kris arrived in Panama on March 15th, 2014. On March 29th, they found a host family to live with while spending time volunteering with children in Boquete, Chiriquí. Chiriquí?
Chiriquí?
Chiriquí? Oh, it might be Chiriquí, actually.
I don't know.
It's a Spanish word, so I'm not really sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. A town, this was a town in the Green Mountain Highlands area of Panama, really close to the border of Costa Rica. So, and it was lying along the Caldera River.
That was so beautiful, I feel like.
Oh my gosh, the pictures are amazing.
Yeah.
It's just, and so this area of Panama is known for being really like, there's tons of beautiful hikes, and it's really remote. It's mostly like little tiny towns, like dotted along the Continental Divide.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Do you guys know what the Continental Divide is? Okay.
So a
it's
lot of
very,
tourists.
like, picturesque.
Well, and it's very attractive to tourists because it's a lot cooler and not quite as like, so it's humid obviously, but it's not hot and humid. It's a little bit cooler because it's such high elevation that it stays cooler. Yeah.
Is it like in a mountain range or is it just high?
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
the Continental Divide is this mountain range that goes from like South America all the way up through North America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the morning of April 1st, the girls went to brunch with 2 young Dutchmen before leaving on a hike through the cloudy forest surrounding the Baru volcano around 11 a.m. They began on the Pianista Trail that was not far from Boquete. That's the town they were staying in. Mm-hmm. And they took a dog with them. In one source I saw that it was like the dog of the host family. Another one I saw was just, it was like a dog that belonged to the owners of a restaurant in town. It's like a really small town, so it's possible those people were the same family. So according to sources, this trail was not super intense, but it could get muddy and damp in the rainy season. So they weren't quite in the rainy season yet. They were getting up to it, so it was like starting to get like rainy enough that it would like flood and stuff, and the ground would get really wet.
So I mean, like we've already talked about this a little bit, but they were like fit girls who like played sports and like were healthy and like kept
and they're
up
super
with
young
themselves.
and healthy and really smart. Like
so like that to me would make it so they couldn't get lost and hurt during a hike. But if it was like getting into kind of when it starts flooding, I don't know. We'll see where that, like what that leads to, I guess, in this case.
So the Pianista Trail was supposed to take them around 4 hours to complete. It's also important to note that this trail was used by a lot of locals in the area to basically move between all the villages on the Continental Divide.
Okay.
So people were walking on the trail all the time.
Yeah.
It's they probably passed some people, to be honest, on the trail.
Okay.
This is important because like if something had happened and they were like in some kind of accident, like somebody would have heard them calling for help.
Right.
Oh.
Or seen them that day and been able to be like, oh, I saw them at this time at this spot of the trail.
Yeah, and like nobody really came forward with information like that. So Kris and Lisanne did not make it home that night, and the dog that was with them came back alone. Yeah.
No bueno.
Yeah, no bueno. On April 2nd, so the next day, a tour guide that was supposed to show the girls around town and likely was supposed to take them like on parts of this trail. He basically was like, they didn't show up. And it's really weird to some people that they decided to go on their own the day before and didn't just wait for him.
So if this tour guide was supposed to take them on that trail, it is weird that they had gone by themselves the day before.
Yeah.
Because they clearly wouldn't know,
Yeah, and so basically between this and then the host family being like they never came home at night, like overnight, they launched like an aerial and ground search of the area. So like all the townspeople joined in, which we're just walking along the trail, walking along like the ground that they would have been in basically.
Well,
and they found nothing.
Did they say, or I don't think you said this, but did it end up like raining on April 1st? Like, was it super rainy and damp and muddy?
I didn't see anything that was like that. And the thing is like a little, if it wasn't like the rainy season, there wouldn't have been so much rain that the terrain would have
changed that
much.
So,
yeah. I mean, the generally accepted something happened and like the trail fell away or they had an accident. And that's like what the official like ruling is.
I just think like it's very cool that all these random townspeople like were going out searching for these girls that aren't even from there. Like it's very small town.
Yeah, small town.
You know,
vibes, for
like
sure. Yeah.
Good for them. Good on them.
So after no clues whatsoever were found, Lisanne and Kris's families flew there along with Dutch officials to continue the search on April 6th. Okay. The search continued on for 10 more days, and the both Lisanne and Kris's parents like combined to offer a $30,000 reward for anybody that had any information. There was actually a Dutch criminal investigator who was like the first to broach the topic of like some wrongdoing happening. And he basically was like, it's really unlikely that they just simply disappeared. Obviously, some people would disagree. They'd be like, oh, they probably just like slid and had an accident. But like the thing is they still would have found a body. I mean, they do eventually, but so after like this initial search, everybody kind of is like, okay, we got to just wait for something to turn up at this point, essentially. So 10 weeks later, they finally get their first piece of like solid evidence. So like 10 weeks. Now they're like well into the rainy season. It's the middle of summer now. So,
well, the terrain had changed a lot by then, I'm sure.
Well, and change isn't quite the right word. It's more just like, it's a completely different weather pattern like 10 weeks later.
Yeah.
So a woman along the riverbank near Alto Romero, she found a blue backpack.
And Alto Romero is a city along that river.
So it's actually a different river. There's like 2 separate rivers between Boquete and Alto Romero. So Alto Romero is a 15-hour hike from Boquete.
The hike they were taking?
So they found this backpack that belonged to Lisanne and Kris.
15 hours away.
A 15-hour hike from Boquete, which is where they started.
I see what you're saying.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
very far.
I just think it's crazy that, I mean, I know we're looping back, but why would they randomly decide to go if they had plans to go with a guide?
I mean, it's obviously, like, we might never know.
Suspicious,
yeah.
is what I'm saying.
So, there is a bit of a, like, train of thought that people are like, well, we saw them eating breakfast with these guys, and these guys haven't come forward with any information. Not to say that these guys did anything wrong, but
they might
I wonder if they went
something
on the hike with them, because
or like
nobody
did
saw
they
them
not
after
hear
brunch.
anything?
Nobody saw them after brunch. They just knew that they were going on a hike that day.
So what if they went with the brothers and something bad happened and the brothers haven't said anything?
Here's the thing, though, like, well, they aren't necessarily brothers. It's just 2 Dutch men, but like, they were Dutch as well. So they're like, oh, like,
they like maybe
the thing is though, like, nobody knows who these guys are. Like, it's just like basically somebody was like, yeah, I saw them eating
with two other men who presumably were speaking Dutch.
I'm assuming, yeah, that's what. Right, exactly.
Okay.
Crazy.
So yeah, the backpack was found like a 15-hour hike from Boquete. The woman that found it claimed to have found it near the rice paddies along the riverbank. So like rice they grow in really wet soil.
Yeah.
And she said that she had only noticed it that day and like never before.
So I mean,
which
that's
is
not
suspicious.
That's suspicious, but it's not like completely crazy, especially if it had become rainy season and there was any kind of flooding.
Well,
it could technically have been washed in from somewhere, right?
Definitely.
But it is suspicious considering the circumstances.
Well, so the main 2 reasons that after all the deep diving I've done that I found that this was weird was that the backpack was not waterproof at all. It was like a regular backpack, and it should have been a lot more broken down from what it actually was. Because like everything inside,
it was 10 weeks later.
All the stuff inside of it wasn't soaked. So it hadn't spent a lot of time in the river.
Oh, that's like the main suspicious thing so far.
And it also, like, it's really unlikely that it had spent 10 weeks in the wilderness getting rained on and stuff. So the contents of the backpack were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, Lisanne Froon's passport, a water bottle, 2 bras, kind of weird on the 2 bras thing, and then finally a camera and both girls' cell phones.
Yeah, that is kind of weird because...
Why would you bring spare bras?
Yeah, on a hike, and also, like, it's not like they had other clothing in the bag.
What I'm thinking.
Like, that was, like, the bag that they brought, you know?
No, there hasn't been any proof of wrongdoing up to, like, you know, ever. Missing from the backpack was Lisanne's asthma inhaler that, it was almost certain that she had taken it with them because they were at such a high elevation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't found, and it was never found. So
it probably got dropped somewhere in like a
most
tussle
likely
or something.
But the thing is like if she was at such a high altitude, she wouldn't have lasted that long without an inhaler if she was having an asthma attack because she had severe asthma.
Yeah,
So
you definitely wouldn't. Like, that's the number 1 rule of hiking as an asthmatic. You don't go anywhere without your inhaler. Like, especially high elevation and if you're exercising. And it sounds like it was a pretty vigorous hike.
Yeah, like it was a pretty
and it was
steep.
Even if it wasn't that vigorous, it was supposed to take 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
4 hours each way.
It is possible that she didn't have an asthma attack, but it's also more likely that she did if she was severe.
Additionally, the backpack had lots of prints on it. This is like another reason why it's suspicious that the woman was like, oh, I just found it. It had 34 sets of prints on the belongings, 34 different sets of prints.
Like 34 different people or 34 different fingers?
34 different, like, prints. Like, so different people. And then there were 13 on the outside of the bag itself as well.
Weird.
13 sets
Yeah,
on the gosh,
so...
okay.
Yeah, that's weird. Oof.
So photos on the girls' phones showed that they had reached the summit of the Pianista Trail between 1 and 2 p.m. Then it looks like they, based on the photos, they continued on to this, like, waterfall that was a little bit harder of a path to get to. So they were basically at the end of the trail, and so they had to, like, get onto this less traveled trail to get to a waterfall. And it was probably more muddy. It almost certainly was more muddy. And they probably weren't prepared for it. So to make it back by sundown, the girls would have had to turn around no later than 3 p.m. because it was a 4-hour hike. And they probably would have known this. Like, they would have known, like, hey, it took us this long to get up here. We need to turn around. So this indicates to me that something stopped them from coming back. Whether it was an accident or something else happened. Like,
something for sure happened.
They would have turned around before it got, like, before they knew they would be
Right,
stuck in the
not-
dark. Like,
they're
they
not-
wouldn't...
they're
exactly.
too smart girls.
Yeah, exactly. Additionally, their phones had been on and in service for 10 days after they left for their hike.
Wow.
So they were on. Well, off and on. So they would, like, turn them off to save battery, and then they'd turn it on every once in a while to see if they could get service.
So these girls were stuck in the
Wait,
woods.
hold on a second. So
Or kidnapped.
they disappeared on April 1st, but then their phones had been on for 10 days after that?
Yeah.
So they didn't die on April 1st
No.
Oh my god. Okay.
That's insane.
Well, I mean, we
Turn number
can't
one.
100%
somebody else could have been
say
doing
that
it,
that
but then
wasn't
there's
them.
definitely foul play.
Yeah. So the thing is I just, like, can't buy that they didn't turn around if something went wrong. Like,
unless they really got lost somewhere.
yeah.
I wonder if because they couldn't find her inhaler, I wonder if that's what went wrong.
Maybe.
Like, that's a possibility, but I feel like it's more complicated than that. But I just wanted to throw that out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, definitely.
That if somebody was having a severe asthma attack and then you're trying to deal with that, maybe you wouldn't be able to make it back.
Yeah, definitely.
And then they got stuck because it was nighttime. Maybe they got lost. Yeah, crazy.
So, the 10 days that they were obviously still alive and struggling and trying to call for help, it's pretty disturbing. Like, so you can look at, like, a chart of, like, all the calls that were going out from each phone and, like, what times and how long they were. So on the first day, a distress call was made from Kris Kremers' iPhone at 4:39 p.m. So this was, like, by this time they definitely would have had to have turned around, but they were still likely at the summit because it didn't connect to anything. Like, they weren't able to get service, basically. And then there was another one made from Lisanne's Galaxy S3 at 4:51. So, like, this is... to me, this seems like this was, like, around the time that something started going wrong, and they were, like, actively looking for help.
100%.
Right. Which basically, it's like they came to the realization, oh crap, it's going to be dark before we get back. We need to, like,
See if we can get service.
what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
But
So,
why did they call for, like, help that early?
If there was an incident that could have caused them, either they were lost or something had happened which would cause them to not be able to turn around immediately.
So a lot of people think that people are pretty sure that Kris Kremers died first, and based on some stuff I'm going to tell you in a second.
Yeah.
And they basically are like, she got injured and then died, and then Lisanne was, like, wandering around by herself for, like, quite a few days, even like up to a week or 2 weeks. And I mean, they only probably had, like, snacks and water for, like, an 8-hour hike, an 8-hour round trip hike,
not days worth of food.
Yeah. So the next 75 distress calls were made to both 112, which is, like, an international emergency number, and then they also tried 911, which is the emergency number in Panama. Only one 911 call out of all of these from the Galaxy S3, which was Lisanne's phone. It connected for a few seconds, and then it finally lost reception again. And this was on April 3rd, so this is 2 days after they left for the hike.
This is so sad.
Yeah, this is, like, really
traumatic.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like, it's kind of disturbing because now I'm starting to think even less so that there was foul play. Like, I'm starting to think that, like, they, like, literally something happened. They got lost. They got attacked by an animal. I don't know. And then 10 plus days or however long.
So I will say there was probably, like, very few animals in this area that could have taken down 2 full-grown humans.
Well, but it doesn't seem like they would have taken it down. Maybe just, like, attack. I don't know. But I'm starting to think less that it was, like, foul play of, like, outside characters. Like, maybe it was just literally, like, this hiking trip gone wrong.
So, Lisanne's Galaxy S3, it ran out of battery on the 5th because it never made another call. And then Kremers' continued to turn on several more times to check for service. Like, they'd turn it on, see if there was service, and then turn it back off. After April 6th, somebody tried unlocking Kremers' iPhone with an incorrect PIN. So this is kind of where they think Kris might have died at this point.
She is already dead, and so they were... Lisanne was trying to use her phone.
And then the iPhone, which was Kris's phone, finally died on April 11th. So this is 10 days. Yeah. This is like, okay, I already said that part. As disturbing as these multiple attempts to get help were, the photos on the camera that was in the backpack were pretty, like, crazy as well. Like, it tells a really scary story, and it's really easy to, like, if you look at them, so obviously, like, a lot of them are of nothing, but it's easy to, like, look at them and be like, oh my god, they were totally panicking.
Like, imagine
like,
the
put
panic.
them, like, imagine, like, the panic in the dark, and it's a heavily wooded area, and
in like a remote area somewhere they have not been for very long.
Yeah, and
like,
they were
never
likely,
been there specifically.
Dressed in pretty, like
shorts and a tank top.
Tank top. Yeah. So on April 8th, so this was around probably a little bit after Kris died, if you are assuming that Kris died on April 6th. So around April 8th, 90 flash photos were taken with the camera between 1 and 4 a.m. So this, they're assuming somebody was using the flash as, like, a flashlight.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. It appears in some of the photos that the girls were near, like, a river or a ravine of some kind. The ground appears very muddy in the pictures. There were also photos of the girls' belongings spread out on the ground in some of the pictures. So there was, like, a photo with plastic bags and candy wrappers, like, on the ground. And there was, like, some weird, like, shaped piles of dirt or mud in some of the pictures. There's, like, a mirror in one of the pictures that's, like, laying on the ground. And then one of them is of the back of Kris Kremers' head, and she has blood dripping down one side of her head.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So to me, immediately comes into my head, there's the accident that happened.
Yeah, maybe.
That she fell and hit her head, and that would explain why she did die first.
Definitely. So some online sources report there were, like, 500 deleted pictures that have never been recovered. This hasn't been, like, reported by the police or anything. This is,
How
like...
would they even know that?
I'm assuming somebody, like, leaked this information, because this wasn't, like, officially released by the police.
So the police
showed that there was, like,
technically know that
things that were deleted. Okay. This is what that person.
So
on the internet
sometimes
is alleging.
Police don't release, like, information like that because they don't want, like, the public to go into, like, kind of like a conspiracy theory frenzy sort of.
Well, and the Panama police definitely were trying to not have people, like, panic that some tourists from, like, some beautiful young Dutch tourists went missing
in a tragic way.
Yeah. So a further search was started after this discovery of the backpack. And they started searching along the Culebra River where the backpack was found. Culebra is snake. So soon after, they discovered Kris's shorts folded neatly on the rock. Depending on the source, they also say that they were found in the river. Because if they were found on... the thing is if they were found folded neatly on a rock, that indicates, like, somebody tampered with them. Like, even if it was just a townsperson and they meant well. Like, I think the Panama police didn't want to admit that, like, so much of their evidence had been tampered with.
Or Lisanne. That her name, right?
Yeah.
Lisanne could have done that, right?
Well, they were Kris's shorts. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but Lisanne could have folded her shorts up and placed them on a rock.
Again,
right?
we're assuming that they hiked almost all the way over to Alto Romero, which is a 15-hour hike. It's possible they wandered that far, I guess, technically, but
yeah, like, I mean, if you think about, like, the panic,
yeah,
you know, you could do a lot of weird things when you're, like,
I mean, that's a long
kind
way
of
to
fighting for your
wander.
life.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So 2 months later in the river, part of a pelvic bone was found. So not the whole thing, just part of it, which is actually
weird.
crazy because it's really hard to shatter
break
a
your
pelvic
pelvis.
bone.
Yeah.
And we're back to foul play.
Yeah.
Well, so the thing is she could have fallen a
So
long
hard.
ways
Yeah.
and technically broken her pelvis. There was also a boot with a part of a foot still inside. This apparently is not that crazy, according to this guy on Reddit, which take that with a grain of salt.
The foot expert on Reddit.
Yeah, not surprising there.
He or she basically was like, this is actually not that weird because the ankle joint, like, will stay intact well after everything else is decomposed.
Okay, so it's like,
so
pop
and
off
plus
at
if your
the
shoe is tied, think about it. So like,
No, I know what you
So,
mean, especially
a hiking boot.
yeah, so the rest of your leg after decomposition will like detach, but the part that's tied into your boot is gonna stay there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little creepy, but like it's very
breaths.
like it's like one of those things that's like sensationalized for no reason because it has like a explanation, I guess.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
So finally the skeletal remains of both girls were found and they were finally like officially confirmed as deceased.
Yeah.
Lisanne Froon still retained some of the flesh on it. So it looked like it had gone through normal decomposition. The flesh on the bones was actually relatively fresh looking, and I'll get to that later when I talk about like some things that could explain
that,
whatever
yeah.
happened.
Well, and also, so if you are among the belief that Kris died first, that would make sense that Lisanne's, like, was a little bit less decomposed.
But the thing
is
there's no way they died further than like 7 days apart.
But I don't know much about body decomposition. Would that make it different?
So I'll get into it. I actually like researched
That's where the deep dive came in.
Yeah, I researched a lot about like how bodies decompose and like it can get pretty crazy. I'm like actually like very interested in it now. I have this book in my Amazon cart that I'm like I need to buy this so I can read it.
It's for the podcast. Don't.
It's for the podcast. It's
Okay.
put on the credit card.
Fine.
No.
On the business card.
On the business card. Yeah, that doesn't exist. Kris Kremers' bones, however, were stark white and they actually looked bleached.
Yeah. I'm reading
So
about that. That's
this says to many people that the conditions of decomp were wildly different. So like they decomposed in different spots, even though they found their skeletal remains within like a reasonable distance from each other.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
Literally any theory that I had is out my mind now.
This is like so confusing because like you start thinking one thing and then another little piece comes out and you're like, wait, no,
Well, it's
that
like,
can't
did
be
someone
right.
to me, like, it almost seems like maybe someone found them. Lisanne was still alive, Kris wasn't, and they tried to like help Lisanne, or maybe they like hurt her. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I
crazy.
mean, nobody knows. That's why it's just like I mean, it's technically it's technically a death, but disappearance kind of covers all the bases, you know? So, the Kléber River increases about double in size during the rainy season. The rainy season technically would have begun in like the weeks following like the last time they were seen. So like late April, early May. Mm-hmm. The river's speed would have also greatly increased during the rainy season, but we can assume when the girls went missing that it was going like a very normal speed. Like it was, I mean, just like a normal river. And it's not super wide either. It's like, it's fairly narrow and shallow.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned already, like they were in good health, like in fitness. So even if it was going like a normal river's speed, you could probably
and at the time
swim or grab onto something, unless they were severely like ill and fragile at that point, you know?
Well, and like the depth of the river at the time that they would have disappeared, it like wasn't deep enough to drown in.
Right.
Additionally, they had hiked about 14 to 15 hours north and passed 2 different rivers. So based on where the remains were found from where they had originated in Boquete. They also crossed over the Continental Divide, which is that mountain range, Well, they kind of like cut across it, sort of. So like,
but still,
they didn't go from the very bottom. To
right.
the
They didn't like
on the other side,
go on
you know
to
what I
the
mean?
top of the mountain.
I said that kind of facetiously, but
they made it through a mountain range, which no matter where
kind
you
of,
go
yeah.
through it, it's still
because
not.
Bouquet isn't like a super low elevation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess if you don't know, it's a huge mountain range that spans from South America to North America.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what mountain range in North America is part of the Continental Divide. I want to say the Rockies.
Yeah, say the
I'm pretty sure it's the
Rockies.
Rockies.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because it's like the entire continent.
Yeah.
So like South America, Mexico, North America. I think it even goes into Canada. Yeah, because the Canadian Rockies is like the same mountain range.
It's
yeah.
the same. It's a continuation. Yeah.
The remains and the other evidence didn't really conclusively lead to a cause of death. They couldn't even really discern how long the girls had been dead because they were in completely different stages of decomposition.
Yeah, which is weird.
So they'd have to try to figure out two different dates of death, but
which wouldn't inherently like make sense if
and
they
it still was
disappeared on
like
the same
completely
day.
inconclusive because like so it's a lot easier to tell how long a body has been decomposing if like larvae are still present on the body that eat the skin off.
delicious.
So yeah, it is a little gross for sure. Anyways, so the official Panamanian conclusion to the death was that the girls had been lost and just succumbed to the elements. Succumbed. I don't know why I said succumbed.
So like that, and I'm usually like a sucker for, there was some foul play involved. But honestly, I feel like that's the case. Like, I feel like that is what happened. Mm-hmm. But because of kind of the uniqueness of like the evidence, especially like the camera photos and the phone calls, like makes you just like, as, you know, true crime junkie, someone who's listening to this podcast, be like, well, there has to be more. There has to be more of an explanation.
The bras?
That is weird. I'll give you that. But sometimes that happens in cases where there's just like one really weird part of the case. And then the rest of it's like...
that doesn't really have like an explanation.
Were you able to find if they were wearing bras?
There would be no way to tell.
They were almost decomposed.
Because
they didn't find any of their clothes.
They didn't recover all of their clothes.
They only found the pair of shorts.
They only found the pair of shorts and then a single hiking boot. So
with a foot in it.
Oh god.
Okay.
I have an
because
idea.
They were out at brunch that morning. Maybe they were wearing their real bras when they were at brunch because they were like in public.
And they didn't change their
And then when they went on their hike, they're like, we got to put the sports bras on.
That's
Maybe.
not a horrible idea.
So that's not that weird. Like, I can justify
that could be
way.
such a like insignificant detail is the thing.
That's
like,
what I'm saying. Sometimes that happens in cases where there's like
super-
something very weird, but then it's like, I mean, crap, if someone like found like my backpack or my purse, they're like, what the hell's wrong with this lady? I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
Personally, there might have been somebody following them in the woods.
But
because
if there was though, how would they have been making all those calls without the person being like, you stupid bitch, like kill you, you know what I mean?
like,
Do you know what I mean? Like
if they were running the whole time, maybe they were getting away for a little bit.
And they had time to
calling.
take a bunch of pics. I mean,
That would explain
I
why
don't
they
know.
weren't calling at night, because it was quiet and they were scared that they would be found. Because not very many of the phone calls were at night.
But how was that person able to survive in the wilderness?
That
was chasing them.
Oh, are you going to get into theories?
Yeah.
Okay, then
Okay.
I won't say anything yet.
So there is a lot of speculation, obviously, around... So if you're a purist, you know...
Well, no,
you're like,
you forgot to say that the Dutch authorities still maintain that it is suspicious, which is important.
Oh. So the Dutch authorities, as far as I know, still maintain that it's suspicious. And the $30,000 reward, again, as far as I know, still stands.
For information?
For information.
Of any kind, basically.
I think if it's... they're hoping that it's going to lead
arrest.
to, like, an arrest, I
or
think.
at least a human.
I will say that I did see somewhere that both Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon's, both of their parents have accepted that it was an accident. I don't know if that means anything
because
to
honestly,
anybody, but
what would you rather want to believe? That your daughters died, you know, like in an accidental death, or that they were like murdered
or being chased around for 10 days?
It just like to sit like comfortably like in your heart, like, because of course it's a very tragic thing, but like, I mean, at least they would know, okay, you know, they were together, they died in a country that they were really excited to explore and, you know, be in.
Yeah.
Not that they were chased. Yeah, that's what you would want to accept as a parent, I think.
So, and technically, the Dutch and the Panamanian authorities haven't, like, technically released any, like, official statements. Like, a lot of the... They really haven't, like, been, like...
Well, it has officially been ruled accidental, though.
Yeah, officially.
But they just haven't, like...
They aren't investigating it anymore.
Okay.
By any means. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of speculation surrounding other things, but especially... Why are the bones bleached?
Yeah, what? Sunlight, I guess? I don't know.
Especially because this could mean that somebody was trying to quickly dissolve the body.
But they just didn't realize how to do it.
Yes, a lot of people are like, this person was trying to do that, and they didn't know what they were doing.
And so they're just like, just dump it.
Yeah.
We can't.
I found this, like, really good, like, really well-researched article it's called imperfectplan.com. Obviously, like a ton of it was, like, irrelevant. Like, it'd be a lot to put in a podcast, but it's a really good article if anybody wants to look at it.
About bleaching of bones?
No, it's about, like, a lot of stuff. He goes into a ton. He goes into a ton of detail.
Okay.
And I just wanted to note that, again, it was only part of the pelvis bone that was found, and then a rib bone that were Kris Kremers, and, like, none of her other bones were found.
Huh?
And it wasn't even a full rib bone. It was part of a rib bone.
And part of a pelvis.
Yeah.
Something wrong happened. Something wrong happened there. But is there any natural, like, nature explained explanation of the bleaching of the bone?
So, yes, technically, what could have happened to make them be bleached, lime and phosphorus can be both present in soil that has been fertilized for farming. So technically, if there was the exact right amount, they could have been bleached, technically.
What are the odds, though? Probably
They're pretty
more.
low. They're pretty low. This is, like, not a very good explanation.
Because if they had gotten to farmland, someone would have found them.
Yeah.
Right?
Because they're, like,
earlier.
in the mountains, kind of, like, trees are everywhere. Like, I was looking
the
at photos.
backpack was found in the rice paddies, though, which is farmland of sorts.
But the backpack also was not deep.
But it, like, wasn't even soaked, so it, like, didn't necessarily get there in the river.
There's no way, because rice fields are really wet. That's that's the conditions you have to grow rice in. So there's no way that the backpack wouldn't be, like, deteriorated after a while.
Remember, there was, like, 34 sets of prints on the outside of the backpack.
That's a no for me, dog.
Or no, there was 34 sets of prints on the contents of the backpack. So, which means somebody was, like, digging through it.
On the outside, too. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, we're also assuming that the Panamanian authorities knew how to properly handle evidence, which...
So that was my first thought when there was that many prints on the bag, is I was like, well, Lisanne and Kris's, obviously. And then maybe the farmer that found it, maybe some police officers.
Probably more than one farmer is what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Same with, like, the shorts. Like, people think that
Which
the reason they
doesn't necessarily mean, like, foul play. Like, you know, like, I feel like if I found a backpack on the side of the road or, like, in the river or on my rice paddy, you know, I would be like...
Oh, the one in your backyard?
I would immediately, like, run up and, like, grab and be like, and touch it. Wouldn't you? Or if if you found a pair of shorts, like, on a rock, would you, like, pick it up and then be like, oh my god?
So I'd be like, what are those shorts?
I'd
pick up the backpack to open it and see if there's identification.
Here's the thing: a lot of people think that they officially said that the shorts were found in the water, but they were actually found on a rock. But if they were folded on a rock, that indicated that people were messing with it that shouldn't have been messing with it, and it was evidence. And, like, they didn't want it to look like they were incompetent and were mishandling evidence. You know?
So to me, it just sounds like, and I don't really know much about, like, Panama, but
I know a lot after researching this case.
Oh yeah, but
I want to go.
I feel like it sounds like the authorities did not handle it very well.
Yeah,
and I don't want to, like, I mean, who knows? Maybe they were doing the best they could, and but it just there's so many fishy things about handling evidence, thinking that photos were deleted.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah. And so we're going to get into, like, elevation, because obviously we're at really high elevations. So Kris and Lisanne, they went missing around the 1,300 to 1,800 meter elevation. This is, like, where they were in Boquete. And they wouldn't have gained that much elevation on this hike. And their remains were found in Alto Romero, on like around the river, the Caldera River, and this was at about 400 to 800 meters in elevation. This is mainly important because the elevations are not quite the same as what people would consider tropical climate conditions, because tropical climate conditions can accelerate decomposition. Just so you guys know.
Okay.
I'm not going to get super into that because, again, like,
that's like
this
really
could be
sciencey.
like, you know.
Yeah.
You could write, people have wrote books about this, obviously. So, according to criminologist Octavio Calderon, it is strange that two people's remains would arrive on the exact same place on a riverbank. Because they were, you know, within, like, several kilometers of each other. Like, they were very close.
It's just not very likely.
Especially because we're kind of assuming at this point that they didn't die at the exact same time. Like, it's pretty unlikely that they would just somehow get to the same place, like, statistically wise.
If we're assuming they didn't die at the same time and their bones ended up in the same place on the same riverbank, there's 110% foul play.
It seems like somebody put them there. Mm-hmm. Even if there wasn't foul play, it seems like somebody put the remains there.
How far away was the backpack from the remains?
It's, like, along the same riverbank. So all of this is, like, I want to say it's, like, a 3 to 5 kilometer,
which is not very far. A kilometer is less than a mile.
I don't know what the conversion is. They're close-ish. They're close-ish. For the purposes of this, they're close-ish.
So a kilometer is 0.62 miles.
Yeah, they're, you know, they're not significantly different, but Calderon, the criminologist, he believes that the only explanation for this is that somebody put them there.
Yeah.
The river had the ability, so technically their river and, like, this area became like a, what would you call that? Like a watershed during this time of year, during the rainy season.
Right.
Technically, like, the river itself and then, like, all the watershed areas around it could have carried these bones that far, technically.
But to the same location?
Yeah, exactly.
Fishy,
but
no pun intended.
The thing is there was 2 different bones from 2 different bodies found in the same exact place.
How did they identify them as their bones?
I'm assuming DNA. I didn't get into identifying skeletal remains. I'm assuming it's DNA, though.
Probably.
Like,
they seem sure.
Maybe if so this is, like, kind of playing devil's advocate. If, like, you don't, like, if you want to believe that it was foul play, but if you want to believe that it wasn't, what if Kris did die first and Lisanne just gave up and just laid down to die with her?
Wow, that's really sad, but I mean, technically that's possible.
Like, after that long?
The thing is again, I don't know why somebody didn't turn around when something went wrong.
I don't know.
And they themselves didn't wander a 14 to 15 hour hike. Like, they probably didn't do that. They probably stopped somewhere in the middle, but again, why didn't they just come back the way I don't know. Anyway. So, in addition, bones don't float, in case you guys didn't know that. They sink.
Yeah, I don't know.
They would have sank if they weren't attached to flesh, and the bones that were found would be scratched up, because the bottom of these rivers was, like, straight rocks. Yeah, it wasn't, like, sand or anything. They were up in the mountains. It was rocks, you know?
So, basically, the idea
bones would
that
have
they could have floated down the river is just out the window.
No, because they would have sank.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I mean, when it was still, like, a whole body, if it was still a whole body, it would have floated. But as soon as there wasn't, like, flesh or anything attached to it, they would have sank because they're
not buoyant.
They're not buoyant, exactly. So we should also mention that at the time that they went missing, the rivers weren't very deep. I did mention this earlier. It's really unlikely that they would have drowned in the river. So, like, and
plus they could probably swim. Oh, but a river moving, yeah. But if it's not deep enough for, like, if you could stand, how would you have drowned?
Yeah, definitely. It is actually more likely that the remains were washed away mid-decomposition as the water levels rose. So, like, if they died near a river, technically as the water rose, they could have gone into the river and then they would have, they could have floated to Alto Romero, you know? Do you see what I'm saying?
Then they could have landed on the beach and then decomposed?
Like, if they died near where the water would eventually cover. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I know what you mean, but once the water covered them and they started to float, if we're assuming that they weren't decomposed by then, they could have floated to where they were found and finished decomposition there, and that could explain the no scratches.
Well, and decomposition is really, everything changes when a body decomposes in the water, so there's a lot of gaps in, like, how long ago they think the girls should have died and how long ago that the remains indicate they would have died is the thing, is where I'm going with all of this, you know?
Oh. Well, based on, like, the phone photos and things like that versus, like, the
So I'm starting
evidence.
to think more and more about that theory that I said about how maybe someone found them and they didn't want to help them, if you know what I mean. Like, they took them somewhere, and that's why there was bleaching of the bones, and the bones ended up in the same exact spot.
So maybe
you know,
they were distressed, something bad happened, and then somebody found them.
And instead of helping them, oh my god, that's
maybe, I don't know. Okay, move on.
Well,
then.
Honestly, though, that, I mean,
There also are those.
I feel like
those
I've seen
Dutchmen
horror movies about
involved.
That could be one of those things that's, like, insignificant.
It could be, but it could be significant. Like, they could have gone.
All of this could not be significant, but we're making it significant, you know?
So my theory, well, one of my many, is that they went into the hike with these Dutchmen. Something bad happened, whether it was because of them or not, and then, like, they
were like, save ourselves,
maybe, or they were chasing them through
if they
the
had
woods.
good intentions, though, they would have come out, if for nothing else, for the $30,000 reward.
What did they have? I think so.
I would have.
So maybe
Well, I
it's
wouldn't have
possible they
killed them,
literally
though.
just had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they left him at the cafe, you know?
There's a possibility they didn't go in with them.
The conclusion that's, like, so now I'm going to kind of get into decomp, and the conclusion that some people have come to, and along with some of the investigators on this case, is that a foreign chemical of some kind was used to intentionally try to dissolve the body of Kris Kremers, but for whatever reason, not Lisanne Froon.
That would be like
And
what I was
ruled
talking
it an
about.
accident?
Well, not everybody believed this, and the thing is like, you can theorize all you want. It doesn't make any of this true, you know?
Well, that would be like kind of like goes along with the theory I said that someone found them and they had bad intentions, and Lisanne was still alive, Kris was dead or
Maybe Lisanne
close
made
to
it
death.
away.
Lisanne maybe made it away, then they chased them, killed Lisanne too, but I don't know.
Well,
That's kind of like going off like on the conspiracy.
they found, this is all conspiracy theories, but they found Lisanne in, like, a more complete state, right? Her skeletal remains.
Which one, Lisanne?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they found more of her.
More of her.
And she still had, like, skin and
So
muscle
I
and stuff
think
attached.
that it's possible that, like Hannah was saying, Kris died and was, like, taken by whoever the foul play was involved with, and then and that would explain kind of her broken up bones, them not finding pieces of it, like, that kind of thing, and then maybe Lisanne made it away from them and was, like, running, and that would explain the later phone calls and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Dr. Georgina Pacheco was quoted in a Daily Beast article, and she said, quote, "There shouldn't be bleaching on these bones," end quote.
Yeah. I agree, Georgina.
And it was pretty widely believed that no natural process had bleached them.
Right, we already discussed that.
Although in theory, lime and phosphorus, like, they could have technically.
Are lime and phosphorus both present in this climate?
Well, so phosphorus and lime are both not always together. So, like, phosphorus could have been naturally present in the soil, and lime would have been present in a fertilizer.
But it wasn't farmland.
Like I said,
we go.
Obviously, I'm not a doctor or a
solved.
I'm not a doctor or a scientist or anything like that, but it's pretty widely believed that no natural process could have bleached them.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, and that just...
I agree.
If no natural process bleached the bones, then that basically solves the, was it foul play or was it an accident? Just saying.
So, not to get super into decomp again, but insect larva
Yum.
is used to, like, determine the point that the body currently is in, they call it the post-mortem interval. It's PMI for short. So the 5 stages of decomposition are fresh, bloat, active decomposition, advanced decomposition, and skeletal delay.
Decay.
Delay?
Skeletal decay. Excuse me. Kris's remains were already in the 4th advanced stage, so advanced decomposition, and Lisanne's were actually closer to the 2nd stage, which would be
Bloat.
So between, like, fresh would be pretty much, that's like what you think of like an immediately dead body before bugs and animals have
and like
eaten
rigor
the flesh
mortis.
off of it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
There was actually still
wait.
insect larvae present on Lisanne's body.
then bloat is like very early on. Like that can't be very long
So her
after
death was
her death.
much more recent.
Yeah, technically.
Gasp.
Or less tampered with.
So this is, I mean, so insect larva, that's like how it goes from a body that still has skin and muscle and fat on it to being just a skeleton. Like the insects are the ones that bring it from like a dead body to a skeleton, if that makes sense, because they eat all the flesh.
Gasping for dramatic effect.
The PMI, the postmortem interval, further didn't make sense to investigators of Lisanne's body, even leading them to believe that there was some type of preservation used, possibly
a
refrigeration.
genuine gasp.
This is honestly totally just theory, obviously, but
so
it's possible. Like they're
Again-
saying that she wouldn't be in this stage of decomposition if she had died in the time period that matched
even if
their-
she had died later than Kris did.
so she
Yeah.
could have
So
died.
again, goes with my theory of someone found them and did not have good intentions, maybe.
Yeah. It is also important to note that we don't know at what point the girls' remains made it into the river. And obviously we don't even know if that's how they got there.
Yeah.
It's most likely that's how they got there, though. And so we don't know, like, how delayed the decomp process was. Because bodies, they decay a lot. Or they decompose.
Decompose. Slower.
I've been
in
talking
water.
a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry,
They decompose-
the English is not translating as well as it normally does between my brain and my mouth. You know.
They decompose slower in water, which you would know if you listen
Decompose-
to our Elisa Lamb episode.
Yeah, decompose slower and also just like in a completely different way.
Yes. It would be evident.
And it would make it harder for them to, like, determine the postmortem interval based on, like, larvae, too.
It's crazy to me that, like, we didn't have enough science. Like, I feel like there's so many cases that I'm like, wow, how did they figure that out?
So the
and
thing
this
is,
one, they did not figure out, like,
this
anything.
wasn't that far away. It's
This
2014.
2014.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we don't know, like, at what point during their decomposition they got into the river. Because, I talked about how, like, the river would arose and, like, wash them away if they were close to a riverbank.
I need to pee. I'm sorry.
all
I was
good.
trying to wait until the end, but I couldn't.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is, like, the water part could kind of explain away the slow decomposition more, or in a different way than refrigeration, you know?
Yeah, but it does not explain at all the bleaching of Kris's bones.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
That's purely Lisanne's that we're assuming that explains away, you know? So moving on to, like, Kris's bones and, like, why it's freaking weird that they were bleached. So when I say bleached, like, there's a couple different things that could have happened. Like, technically they could have been bleached by the sun, but they were in no way out in the open for long enough.
yeah.
Not to mention there was lots of tree cover. So this is, like, pretty much out of the question. They would have had to completely be void of flesh and already in skeletal decay, which would not have happened in this time frame.
Uh-huh.
For them to be that bleached. And they would have had to sat out in the sun.
Right, like that.
No cloud cover, no
That
trees.
was my
like,
first thought
yeah.
of bleaching was like, okay, they were just out in the sun for a really long time, but like now I'm thinking like kind of rainforest kind of climate.
Sort of.
maybe?
It's not quite as tropical as I'm sure you're imagining. Like, don't think Costa Rica. It's a lot more like Andes, like, and it's higher elevation, so it's not quite as like the same weather.
But still,
it's like
tree
foresty,
coverage.
but
Sure.
humid.
Yeah, there's a lot of forests. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. All in all, we must assume that someone or something purposefully bleached these bones because, above all, even if we ignore everything else, there was chemical residue on the bones. So with phosphorus and lime present, it's clear that someone tried using some combinations of chemicals to dissolve the body. And for whatever reason, again, they only did this to Kris. That we don't have a more concrete
That's
reason.
where you have to, like, theorize.
That's where you have to theorize.
Maybe they were experimenting with how they wanted to decomp the bodies. But if we're going with also the theory that they preserved Lisanne's body,
Why would they preserve hers?
that's what makes me think maybe they were just like,
other than to
this'll
further
work.
confuse the authorities when it
Yeah,
came
that's a
to
good point.
investigation.
According to, like, some of the scientists that, like, were working on the, like, autopsies and, like, piecing together how they decomposed, they were like, somebody did this that didn't really know what they were doing. And likely, like, they tried to dissolve them, and then they just, like, put them in the ground, and then the water came and it, like, washed the remains that, like, hadn't been completely bleached
that's
yet, or
really
completely
logical.
dissolved. This, again, doesn't explain why no cuts or marks were present on the bones. There would be cuts or marks on the bones if they had, like, been drug along the bottom of the river, like they had, like, floated downstream.
Which they would. Because
This would
they
also,
sink.
there would also be marks on the bones if, like, an animal had got to the remains, which would have been fairly likely. It's unlikely that there was a big enough animal that could have, like, killed both of them.
But there was still animals out there.
Yeah, if there was a dead body on the ground, an animal obviously would have got to it.
Even if just small animals.
There was also obviously, like, no, like, cut marks. Like, somebody had, like, cut the bones up.
Right.
If that makes sense. Which could, like, explain what, like, that could be, like, you could look at that and be like, her pelvic bone was just broken. Like, she actually fell so far that it broke.
Right.
Technically.
Or naturally.
But, I mean,
like,
your pelvic bone is extremely strong.
Or is it possible that...
like,
in,
I think
the
I read somewhere it's one of the stronger bones in your entire body.
Is it possible that in the bleaching of the bones...
Hello. We're almost done.
We're almost done.
Yeah, we're about to wrap it up. Go ahead.
I'm glad you came. I was wanting you to come.
Or is it, like, possible that during the bleaching of the bones, however that happened, that it would weaken the bone, that it would, like, just kind of, like, break or, like, dissolve off?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Okay.
technically.
Okay.
It's... Oh, wait.
Additionally, it's hard to explain.
It's because I know I wrote all of this, so I keep saying stuff and then looking back
That
at the notes, and
happens,
it's stuff
yeah.
I was supposed to say. Like, that stuff I already had said.
Like you were going to say.
Yeah. So, technically, like I said, technically her pelvic bone could have broke from her falling. But, I mean, if you're trying to, like, theorize about it, you could be like, this was somebody attempting to break up the bones or dissolve them, or possibly she was tortured, if you want to look at it that way. Technically, somebody could have broken it in the process of torturing her. You're making, like, the worst face. Honestly,
afraid.
that's the face that I was making when I was researching this.
Yeah.
I feel ya. So, in my mind, I'm going to talk about, like, the most likely explanation, and that's that they just really didn't handle this entire case well at all. And I think this is, like, this requires the least amount of conceptualization. Like, you're literally just saying, like, they did a really bad job of handling this case. They didn't handle the evidence well. They didn't look very deeply into some of the more problematic parts of evidence, like why she had chemical residue on her bones when she supposedly died of natural causes.
So honestly, I feel like that is a really, like, possible, like, explanation, that it got to a point where they're like, okay, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like, we can continue to theorize all these things, but, like, no one's come forward with any, like, I don't know, evidence or even, like, just, like, minor information. Like, oh, I saw some people hiking.
Nobody said anything, which
no.
is really, like, strange, for sure.
It's unlikely that anybody...
Or maybe someone did say something and they
Well,
just
and that's the
haven't
thing.
released
Somebody would have, if they were
They
in
would have been
distress, somebody would have seen them. It's not like these trails were, like, that remote that there was nobody ever walking on them. Anyway, so the coroner themselves said Lisanne's body was manipulated in some way. Like, there's evidence of them saying that. Her joints had been disarticulated, so, like, they had been split. Like, so, like, where your joint is, like, the bones had split. disarticulated. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew what that meant.
No, I didn't. So
I thought you meant like it had just been like bent a different way.
No. Like the bones at the joint had been split at the joint.
Okay, yeah.
This would only start to happen in a later stage of decomposition. So this
Which
would
she
happen.
wasn't in.
This would happen after all the flesh was gone.
Which was not the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Timeline wise, this was ignored. Not to mention the extremely broken pelvic bone,
Which we've discussed. We've mentioned.
were there more remains that were cut or hacked up, but this didn't fit the Panamanian officials' narrative.
Yeah.
Like,
maybe.
that was one of the things that I, after doing most of this, was like, that actually sounds possible. There was also extreme mishandling of evidence, obviously, and probably just, like, there was, like, straight up loss of evidence. Like, it seems like they might have found more again, and they didn't.
Like
say
I
that
was
they
saying,
found more,
like they just
or they like
didn't include
lost
that.
some of it. Multiple
And
fingerprints on the
maybe
backpack.
if
like,
at some point someone comes forward with like information, maybe they will like say, okay, that kind of fits with this other
What?
this kind of fits with this other evidence, so now we'll bring that evidence forward. Do you know what I mean? And they just never brought the evidence forward because they're like, well, shit, we don't have like a follow up for it. You know?
yeah, totally.
I was like having a stroke, I think. I don't know. That was crazy.
So there was actually, they found several other sets of human remains in this area during their search.
That's bizarre.
Which, again, you can think whatever
way
you
to
want
bury
about
the
that.
lead.
Sorry, wait, what?
I said way to bury the lead. Like,
what does that mean?
That's bizarre.
What does bury the lead mean?
Has no one ever heard that?
I've never heard that expression.
Like bury the lead in the story. Wait,
Yeah,
what?
I've
Maybe
heard
I am
it.
having a stroke. I don't know.
No, I have heard that expression.
Okay, I feel like I've never heard that expression, but maybe I'm not. I'm just like not experienced in life. That's possible.
Well, I mean, let's just say that, like, I agree with the fact that maybe if there was more remains found, they were just like, oh, damn, another one.
Despite all of this, the Panamanian officials still chose to, like, quickly just close this case and dismiss
What about the other
it as an
bodies?
accident. So here's the thing. To me, and again, I'm sure the Panamanian officials were working with what they had, honestly. But I just have a gut feeling that if this happened, and I don't know anything about Europe or Netherlands or whatever. So, like, let's look at, like, American cases that I know about and, like, how, let's say, the FBI, like, used a tiny bit of evidence and they were like, there's something more here, and they kept looking at it. Like, I have to think if this same thing happened in a place that had more resources, more things would have been discovered.
They gave up really
and they
quickly.
probably, yeah. Which, again, I mean, it's no fault of their own, maybe, and now it's, like, it's been so long that, like, I'm sure everybody's already found closure, but, like, this wouldn't be a true crime podcast. We didn't try to, like, dig up shit that didn't need to be dug up, you know? So overall, there was a reason two perfectly healthy and intelligent women went missing at the exact same time, and it was certainly nothing natural, in my opinion, like a flood or an animal attack. So, you know, like, the cartel and crime, like, organized crime is pretty rampant in South America. And they were saying, like, if this was, like, somebody, quote-unquote, important, or the child of somebody, quote-unquote, important, they probably would have looked a lot deeper into this.
Yeah.
Or if this was a crime committed by somebody, quote-unquote, important, it would have been easy to brush it under the rug, you know?
I have one more theory that I want to talk about.
Real quick, I do want to say, like, the last, like, half of this with all the theories, I did get from this one article, and so I'm going to link it in, like, the show notes.
Okay.
So that everybody can look at it if you want. It's a really long article, and, like, there's a lot of stuff that you have to, like, it's, like, so much information that it's awesome, but obviously I briefly summarized it in this podcast, so if you guys want to read it, I'll link it.
So, this isn't my main theory, but I did read up on the case a little bit, and because I was looking for pictures from the phone, but I found this theory that there is a lot of indigenous people in the area, and that not all of the tribes, and I want to tread lightly because I don't want to call anybody the wrong thing, but I've read that it could have been a not so welcoming tribe that was involved.
That is a theory,
but
that is, I guess, possible.
And that maybe like they just felt like they were treading on their ground. That is a possible theory. However, my chosen theory is that these Dutchmen were involved. And I think that they left the cafe, they went on this hike, that the men talked them into going today instead.
So, and here's the thing. Let's assume that they didn't do anything.
Why haven't they come forward?
Well, and, the cops didn't even,
Ask.
look into finding them. Because nobody, it was literally somebody who was
knew it was, John and
they just
Sam
saw
or
these
whatever,
two girls. They knew
Speaking
who these
Dutch.
They saw these two girls. They knew who they were because they had been in town for a little bit before they went on this hike, and they saw him with these other two people. Nobody knew who the guys were.
Exactly.
Except for
Wasn't
Lisanne
it odd that,
Kris,
that those two guys were, also Dutch?
In the same area.
I think that's
In
the
the
only
same
reason that
small
they,
town in
had...
Panama?
I mean, not really. This was, a fairly... I mean, it's a lesser-known touristy area in
But
Panama.
it is a touristy area.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's fairly touristy.
So, continuing my theory, I think that they left the cafe with the men. These men convinced them to go on the hike this day. And they went off into the woods. Something bad happened, whether it was caused by the men or not. And the girls started to panic, maybe started running through the woods. That would explain kind of the phone timeline of the incorrect password and us thinking that
Well, and it
it's
technically
possible.
could explain how they did a 14 to 15 hour hike by the time that they would have passed away. It could explain how they went that far too.
If they were
technically,
running.
if they were running.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
But man, you'd run into some shit before you got that far, in my opinion, especially if they're doing it in the dark. But again, they were trying to use... I wonder... I am still sticking to the, I think... So, again, this is not technically released information that there was 500 deleted pictures. But if I'm rolling with that for real, I'm what was in those pictures?
if you
If
you have to go to the extent of hiding evidence, then obviously there was something in it you don't want to be seen. Mm-hmm. So I just think that they were running from these men, or it could have been somebody else, and then something bad happened. I'm thinking that something bad happened to Kris. They were like, oh shit. Even if they weren't already in distress and running from the men, something could have happened to Kris. And they were like, oh no, people are going to blame us. What do we do? Or they were chasing Kris, something bad happened, and she started to die, and maybe she told Lisanne, run, go get help, it's okay, I'll be fine, or I'm gonna die anyways, just leave me here. Mm-hmm. And she tried to run away and made it kind of far, and then eventually got caught by whoever these bad people are, or she couldn't get out. I mean, that's 5 million different theories in one. But there's just so much random evidence that has, I feel like all the evidence this isn't linked to each other.
Here's the thing. I mean, a lot of it comes back to, one main idea that can be summarized as the decomposition, the points of decomposition of the remains that they found don't make any sense.
No.
At
Exactly.
all. And it's weird that the police didn't investigate that further.
Yeah, my theory, because Caitlin's kind of already discussed her theory, maybe.
I mean, my theory was all the information I just presented to you guys. So.
It's hard to have just
my theory, I think, the one that I'm going to stick with. But, again, throughout this entire episode, every new piece of information, made me, change my mind or think, more critically.
Me
and be
too.
What?
I think the fact that we are thinking critically about this and the officials didn't.
It's weird.
Sketchy.
But my theory basically is that they went on a hike, something went wrong, specifically to Kris. Mm-hmm. That's why on the photos there is a picture of the back of her head, maybe she did fall.
Well, it was it was the back of her head, and then there was blood dripping down the side of her head.
Yes.
Yeah, which could indicate that she fell, and that's why her pelvis bone was broken.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that basically my theory is that something bad happened, and Lisanne and Kris were
looking
basically
for help.
panicking and looking for help, trying to
Yeah.
get out, trying to go somewhere. And like, again, it's really hard to like speculate what you would do in a situation where you were
totally.
in pure panic like this.
Yeah.
Right,
Because,
in the dark.
because maybe
Dude,
you
as-
could hike 14 hours. I don't know. I've never been in a situation like that.
As soon as it got
like, wouldn't you
dark,
just like start walking to try to get anywhere but where you were? Like
they must
anywhere
have-
closer to
They must have
something?
got turned around at one point, or yeah, because they were on a trail. They had to have gone turned around somewhere
Yeah.
when they got to the waterfall.
Yeah. But my theory doesn't really explain like anything else, like the bleaching or anything. So then that's kind of where like the second half of my theory comes in, that someone found them. Maybe it was police officers and they just didn't handle the investigation very well.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it was people that had just like bad intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, you know, the bleaching of Kris's bones and maybe the preservation of Lisanne's body was like for like personal use. That sounds so disgusting, but you know what I mean.
Ew.
Like there, like maybe like there are bad people in the world. It's true crime podcast.
There's
you guys know
bad
that.
people in the world. What?
So that's
Shook.
my theory, but this is a crazy case.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that, again, like, sure, at face value, it's just kind of like a really sad story of these girls who were traveling around the world on this like post graduation trip and they got lost and died.
It's also so easy to
But
brush it off as, oh,
the
these
thing
girls
is,
got lost and
The
died.
fact that there is so much speculation of very novice people, like people on the internet or like you and I, like, the fact that there's that much speculation makes me wonder,
Yeah.
like, probably wasn't an
So
accident.
you guys wonder about it too and sit and ponder this case
Yes.
for a little bit.
Obviously, like, the thing is with cases like this, I'm always like, are we looking too far into it? Like, are we making a mountain out of a molehill? Which we might be. We might
Maybe.
be.
Which
Don't get me wrong.
is fine. Like, at least we have...
At least someone's thinking critically about
But
it.
again, we're not the only people that think it. There's a lot of people on the internet.
It's the same thing with Elisa Lam. Like, there's a lot of people speculating stuff, which makes me think if all of these people are, like...
That's all I'm saying. All I'm
Then
saying.
something weird happened. But comment on our Instagram or our YouTube, Who What Where podcast, what you think. Like,
Yeah.
what you think happened. If you think it was an accident, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, seriously. And again, sorry for the extremely long episode. If you're still sticking around,
Yeah.
we really appreciate you guys. I know this is probably like a weird, long, sort of disconnected one, so like, be a good.
Forgive us.
Yeah. Anyway, there was lots of information to give you, and there were certain things that I definitely didn't want to leave out. But thanks so much for listening this far. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Who What Where Podcast, and we will see you on Friday.